Hi, I'm Renata Bernardi, and this is the Job Hunting Podcast, where I interview experts and professionals and discuss issues that are important for job hunters and those who are working to advance their careers. So make sure that you subscribe and follow, and let's dive right in. Natalie, it's been, maybe 3 years since we last spoke, and it's the second time that you are a guest on the Job Hunting Podcast, but the first time that you were alone. Where's Natalie? Lisa, sorry.
Yes, well, we parted ways amicably in the middle of last year, 2025, to pursue some of our own individual endeavours outside of our business, actually. So it is a little bit weird. This is probably one of the first podcasts on my own.
Do you miss the companionship? I feel very lonely. I work by myself, and I was kind of jealous of both of you always having such a good vibe and a good energy between the two of you.
Yeah, I do. And as much as we're both in a really great place individually, I think definitely having that camaraderie and that commonality in a goal and a passion, I'm definitely missing that piece.
What did you do together that you're really proud of?
We had lots of women, when we decided to close, reach out to say, thank you for helping me say the word menopause. Thank you for helping me look into it. And some women who even said, you just saved my life. And we could never have imagined that's the impact that we would have had. Yeah.
Definitely. You and Lisa were one of the pioneers in Australia talking about menopause, especially menopause in the workplace. So that was so important. And that's why I wanted you on my podcast as well. Now that you're working for yourself, is menopause still a big part of what you're going to focus on? How would you explain what you're doing in 2026 and beyond to somebody that doesn't know you?
When we closed the business, I moved out of that and come into my own career on my own. It was something that I had to be very conscious of, that I need to drop that piece. Not so much drop it, but when you're trying to create a new brand and trying to create a new area of work, I had to make a conscious decision that I couldn't talk so much about menopause, because I'm coming back into three loves: business, leadership, and wellbeing, and want to bring, I guess, a new focus area and people to see me with the 10 years of experience I've got in business on my own, plus, other career endeavors before that. I've had to shift that brand a little bit. So this year for 2026, it's really about amalgamating those and seeing how business and leadership are not standalone from wellbeing. And when I talk about well-being, I talk about the whole person. So physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and also that purpose and fulfillment as well. If there's one thing I saw across my work with women through menopause, it's just that desire for that sense of fulfillment and purpose and satisfaction across their 40s and their 50s.
Yeah, no, I think it's important to take that time to reflect, once you reach a crossroad, which you and Lisa have done. And it's so good. I love, to reinvent yourself, reinvent myself. And we're doing that somewhat at the beginning of the year as well. And that's really great. Talking about sort of that cadence of a year-long situation, I want to play a game with you, starting with this question about what we both think will happen at the end of 2026. Like, if I do this every year in terms of understanding what I want for my area of expertise, and I try to think about headlines that I want to see, not that I can make it happen, but what I can foresee as something that will happen by the end of 2026, if possible, in the best case scenario. For me, it's best case scenario. You can go whichever way you want. But I will start, and then I want you to talk about your work in terms of a headline for December 2026 about leadership and well-being. For me, in my area of expertise, in terms of job hunting and career planning, I would love December 2026 to be the time when people realize that remote work and hybrid work are here to stay, and that we stop, especially with my clients in the US, we stop this policy of making people come back to work full-time, which many of my clients are facing on both sides of the coast, east and west. And that's why they seek me out, because they don't want to work full-time in the office, and they have to find a hybrid, maybe remote option for them. But I see this as a knee-jerk reaction of managers and leaders not knowing how to build a high-performing team that works hybridly or remotely, and that's on their plate, not on the employee's plate to fix. I think 90% of the time there is an opportunity for people to work remotely and really be optimal at it. That's my wish for a headline in December 2026. What would be your wish?
Good question. My focus is really coming into possibility, and possibility for an individual, but also possibility for organizations. And I think it aligns quite well to your wish as well, in that let's expand our mindset to have a possibility mindset. And we don't have to have it figured out. We don't have to have the full path planned, but let's just nurture the possibility of whether it's change, whether it's, looking at hybrid work, or the possibility of really supporting our people around their health and well-being. Yeah, this year for me is all about possibility and helping people to just tap into that. So I'd love more and more individuals and businesses to adopt that possibility mindset.
I think especially for Generation X and even some of the boomers that are still working, and good for them, that nostalgia of sticking to the past can become very set in their ways, in the way that they want to run their businesses and lead their teams, rather than, like you said, adopt the possibility of doing things differently. And I think that's really important, especially as we have such a diverse generations working together in the workplace these days. What would you tell leaders to do now so they're not reacting later or overreacting later?
Yeah, I'm very much about coming back to us and coming back to our body. And I don't think we spend enough time in the present moment, and nor do we spend enough time actually connecting to ourselves. So when I think about, how do we not be reactive, it's really understanding, how do we react to situations? So what is our emotional response to things when situations arise, and really understanding that, and then using that as knowledge and as an opportunity, and can I say possibility, of harnessing that to support relationships, to support our curiosity around what our people need, or also being curious about what we need as well. So yeah, definitely coming back to where we are now, to the present, and not forward looking to the future too much, but just, yeah, where am I right now? What do I need? And what can I do to support myself?
Okay. Mine is a kind of a version of that, even though I'm much more future oriented than what you're suggesting. But what I wrote in my plan for this year, what would you tell leaders to do now so they don't overreact or react later, is to not overcommit to things in the future. Because the work I do is so much about planning, like people sign up to work with me because they want to plan their careers for the next decade or two so that they're in control, etc. But I feel like that sometimes is misinterpreted with too much overcommitment of things that they need to sign up for and do. Whereas I'd much rather work super slow and incrementally. That's usually how I like to do things. And I feel like people can be very overwhelmed if they, overcommit themselves. 2026 being a year that they need to do so many things. No, cut that in half, cut that by a third, and then maybe focus on that. You're so into well-being, and I want to ask you a couple of true and false questions for you. I don't have answers for those, though I really want to learn from you. True or false? Resilience training fixes burnout.
False, a big false.
Okay, tell me.
So resilience training supports the individual, and we're all hardwired for resilience, and we can definitely develop and train that muscle, but it doesn't necessarily change the environment or the system in which we work in. So I think, it's really important that we support ourselves as individuals, but also look at how do we now bring resilience into the entire ecosystem, and train that muscle within the environment we work.
Yeah, no, I have seen a lot of very resilient people burn out harder than people that have less resiliency in their talent scores when I do the assessment for them. So I get it. Another true or false: if someone is good at their job, they will naturally adapt to artificial intelligence.
Again, I'm going to say false. And reason being is that AI is a tool, right? But it's also, I don't think it's another tech technology tool that we've ever used, but what's not something we've ever used before, but it's very different to what we've used before. So I think there's got to be a new way of learning around how to use AI, but how to use AI to enhance the way we work and support the way we work, and also the way that we show up as well.
Yeah. You know, when people book discovery calls with me and I ask them what sort of jobs they want to do, sometimes, rarely, but sometimes it's something along the lines of, I want to do anything that does not involve learning artificial intelligence or doing this or doing that. I just want to do what I have been doing. I know they're not the client for me.
Yeah.
Don't think I can help you. It's just so hard to find those nostalgic jobs, they're dinosaur roles and they're not there anymore. So yeah, it's good to hear from you about that. Another true or false, I have an opinion on this. Career pivots require a big leap.
I'm going to say false again. I've gone for the triple P with false, because I think that we can create big change incrementally and small
Yes.
steps. And, if we're going to be really intentional, and I'm assuming the clients you work with, they're the sort of people who have an intention, or they have a focus in mind around how they want their future career to look. And in being intentional, we have to be methodical and we have to take small steps. And also pivot. I'm a prime example of that. We've got to pivot at certain times when things feel misaligned. So yeah, small steps create big change. And I use a phrase throughout my yoga, actually, that a little goes a long way. And we can definitely adopt that same mentality when it comes to career change as well.
I agree with you. I think it's also false. I think the big leap is less about the actual career pivot, but more inside your head. It's like a mindset change that needs to happen to allow you to think creatively about your career. It doesn't need to be a 180 tomorrow, but your mind needs to be ready to do that incremental change and to feel vulnerable and lacking in knowledge. Maybe for the first time in decades, when you're doing a career pivot, you have to unlearn things and then learn new things. So I think the big leap is more here than anywhere else. All right. So let's say you have a client that reaches out to you and feels super flat, successful on paper, but really unmotivated. What are the questions that you would try to ask that person to uncover what's going on?
Yeah. So a few years ago, I learnt this 3-question exercise from a well-known associate professor, Michelle McQuaid. I don't know if you know her.
Where's she from?
So she was Melbourne based, actually, working out of Melbourne University. I think she's now in Canada, but she's done a lot around positive psychology. And I've seen her speak at a few different conferences, and she always kept coming back to this 3-question exercise. And so first question is, what's going well for you, or what's working well? Second question is what are you struggling with? And then the third question is, what do you need, or what support or what learning do you need? So you can expand that dependent on the context, right? And
Yeah.
the reason I love that, and I do use that in whether it's coaching or in workshops, because it brings you back to, I guess, very much the basics in terms of where you are. So we have a moment of reflecting on what's going well. We then have a moment of actually being really honest with ourselves to say, actually, you know what, this is not working. And then the third question is the learning opportunity for us, and the growth learning goal around what is it that I need, and is what I need just to reach out to someone and have a conversation? Do I need to, research some things? Do I need to change this or do this? And so I always start any session with that 3-question just to help, bring people back to where they are. And then I feel like once you've got that last question really solid, we can then expand and look and say, okay, where do we go to from here? What's the next step?
No, I think that's great. I have a version of that inside my client platform, but it's like a whole 2 pages of questions
Yeah.
that people need to answer before they have the first coaching session with me in my program. But yeah, I think it's the most important thing in my view is writing them down. I think it's so easy, or saying it out loud, by yourself or with a coach or with a mentor. But ruminating on these things on your own can be very detrimental for mental health, I find. And I think that people keep a lot of those thoughts and ideas and reflections inside their heads, and they don't verbalize them, they don't journal. And that's when I think things can really spiral down if they don't do that. So I think that's the benefit of either journaling or working with a coach. So that's really great. One of the things that I mean, we are different. We offer different types of coaching services, but they're complementary. And somebody may want to do coaching with you for a period of time, and then coaching with me for a different time, and that's fine. But we probably overlap in terms of the types of clients that we have. And I'm assuming you also have this sort of client, which is like somebody who is very experienced, most likely a leader, senior executive, or a manager with lots of responsibilities, lots of important KPIs that they need to achieve. So they're usually very high performing, but they're constantly tense and reactive. I was talking to somebody, I think yesterday, one of my clients, and we were talking about the fact that for so long she was always wired for stress, wired to be reacting to everything. I don't think people think about it, but waking up in the morning every single day for over a year, if not more, to know that you're going to work in an environment where your boss is, for lack of a better word, an asshole. I'm just thinking about that book that I always talk about, the asshole role. So that book, and the team is struggling, and there's lots and lots of restructures happening, lots of people leaving, and then eventually she left as well. So day in, day out, they come to me as clients so tense, so reactive. Where, if that happens to you, if you have a client like that, where do you start?
Yeah. And I see it so much. And can I say that's where I was nearly 10 years ago. And that was the catalyst for me in making a career change, because I was so stressed and tense, and actually not even realizing that that's what I was experiencing. And also until I studied stress and what it does to the body. So this is quite an area that I'm very interested in and love talking to people about. But essentially, it comes back to what I was talking about earlier around that connection to what we're feeling in the body and the emotions in the body, because our body is always talking to us. And of course, it's our nervous system and it's our adrenals that are being impacted when we are deeply stressed, that we need that time to actually try and slow things down a little bit. Being yoga and meditation teacher, one of my key areas is really helping people to bring the breath back into their day, because we all breathe, but we forget to breathe, or we forget that we're breathing. And that is one of the greatest ways that we can actually start to just slow things down and again, bring ourselves back to where we are. I have another question that I ask people, and I often encourage them to ask themselves this every morning when they wake up, and even journal, write it down. What am I feeling? Because I think we never ask ourselves, what is it that I'm feeling? And that just in itself opens up the opportunity to not feel what we're feeling in our head, but actually feel what we're feeling deep in our body. And that's a real catalyst again to say, something's not feeling right. I'm feeling off. I'm not feeling myself, perhaps feeling misaligned, feeling deeply stressed or on the verge of burnout. And yeah, it's a great question to just explore. But of course, we want to ask it over a bit of a period of time, particularly if we're thinking about change. We could ask ourselves once and we could get one answer, and the next day we could get another answer. But this is about trying to build a pattern and an understanding of, okay, what is it that I'm experiencing and why am I experiencing it? And in connecting to our body, that helps us then to connect to the thoughts that our emotions are creating, but then also brings us back to, what are the beliefs that I've got that are also creating these thoughts? Because we possibly have beliefs around how we should be working and how we should be showing up. And if we're not meeting those expectations, then we have thoughts of self-judgment or self-loathing. And then that creates feelings in the body of, disgust or shame. So yeah, you can probably see there's a pattern here in the way that I work with people initially, is just, coming back into the body and asking, what am I feeling? And using that again as information to support our next step.
Natalie, one thing that I wish I knew better 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and I've only recently started to notice are my triggers, the physical manifestations of my stress, and I was discussing it with my specialist. I was seeing him on Monday, and he had a list of triggers. So he was asking me, do you feel this, do you feel that? And I'm like, yes, 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 yes. And then there was one that he didn't ask, and I had to tell him. And it was like such a weirdo, because I'm such a weirdo. It was a weird one. So my trigger that I think is most telling to me is I start hearing noises that other people don't hear. Like when you flick a switch to turn on a light, I hear a very sharp noise. When there's a battery or anything charging next to me, I hear the noise of the charging. You're not supposed to hear it, but I do. And that's when I know I'm flaring up. That's when I know I'm not in my comfort zone. I'm in a fight and flight zone. And that's the first thing that shows up. If I don't pay attention to that, then I start having like blurry visions. And some, when I was working in the corporate world, it was really embarrassing because I had an outward facing role and I always had a red eye. Like it would have that sort of effect on me. Just the stress of the work would cause that sort of manifestations on my health. I have a lot of clients that have IBS, or if they have ADHD, the ADHD will just get worse even under medication. So knowing your triggers, I think, is so important, isn't it? And it's what you said, like we don't touch base with our feelings, and then our body starts showing that there's something wrong, and then we don't pay attention to that as well.
Yeah.
So fascinating.
Yeah, our body's always talking to us. And because
Yeah.
we are so busy and we're so in our head, we're not taking the time to stop and listen and feel. And, I think what you're highlighting there with your experience is the senses. We get a sensor overload, and it's your particular sense of hearing that obviously heightens at a moment of stress. I feel it deep in my belly. I get that feeling of, butterflies or something in my belly. And straight away, I know that, okay, I'm in a situation that is going to elicit the fight or flight. I need to just breathe and stop and take a step back, and choose my response. And I think if there's one thing I can say about stress, we can't always eliminate stress. We can't always minimize it. And there's stress all around us, but we can actually choose how we respond to stress. And coming back into our body is a really great way to do that.
Do you run breathwork workshops?
I was doing a lot of yoga and meditation in the past through the business, but because I'm in this sort of phase of pivot and a bit of transition, I'm not yet. I'm going to say yet at the end. Yeah.
Okay. Because I've done one with Josh Peterman here in Melbourne. I'll put a link below because he's running quite a few this year. And I think I need to do more. I did my first one. It was like a whole day. And it's a lot, isn't it? Like, have you done one? Like, I didn't expect it to be so emotional and so important. And I was sometimes kind of sort of feeling very self-aware and not really engaging with the exercise as much as I wanted to. So I want to do another one. I think he's running another one before I go away to Europe. So I'll try to do that. I promised him that I would take his mother with me, who has been a guest on this podcast. So I'll link her as well in the episode show notes. So Hannah Peterman, she's an amazing coach and consultant. So I think breath work is amazing. And we're only sort of tip of the iceberg of what we can do with our breaths. So interested in. And Josh is so knowledgeable, having been, still is, an amazing singer. Of course, he has that background of knowing how to breathe. I don't know how to breathe. People make fun of me because sometimes I do forget to breathe and I will cough. Like at work, I remember people noticing that I was either sighing or coughing because I hadn't sort of breathed for a minute or two. I'm just too worried or stressed about an email or a conversation or something, and I would just stop breathing, which is ridiculous. So I really need to work on that. Another fun thing for us to do, 2 things that you will stop doing in 2026.
Good question. Definitely pushing in terms of over striving, might I say. So given the work I was doing around menopause, I can reflect and say that I was really striving to create the narrative. And, I guess a reason why we stopped the business is because we saw that there's still a really long way to go. And we sort of got to the point that we said, we can't wait for our own sanity. We can't wait for workplaces to be ready. And so I can see over that 6 years, there was a lot of pushing, a lot of striving to get people on board. but realizing that things take time and divine timing, things will happen as they need to happen. So big part of me is, not pushing or not over striving, might I say, still taking action, but not trying to force outcomes. I think that's probably more to the point. And then what will I keep, right, was the question, keep doing?
Keep doing, yeah.
Yeah.
Or start doing. Maybe start doing if you haven't started yet.
Yeah, start doing. Yeah, I think I'm going to show up a little bit differently to how I have again in the past, because I am solo on my own and I've got a new message, sort of, a new focus or refined focus, and just, showing up differently.
For me, I decided to do the podcast once a fortnight instead of once a week. And that has been such a hard decision for me because I was just so set in my ways and I love routine and I don't like to change routines. Even if they're not working, I just stick to them so strongly. But I think it's for the best. So last week was the first week where I didn't release an episode. And I think my biggest fear is that it will impact my business, getting clients, because most of my clients come from listening to the podcast. But it was fine. Like I got 2 new clients last week. I mean, it's the beginning of the year, so it's usually the time that people do sign up for coaching, especially job hunting, if they're looking for work. So, but it was just such a good, finally I can do this and I can have a bit more time for other things. 2 things that I will start doing is, oh gosh, I'll put a link below to what I did a couple of weeks ago, which was basically just showing up more courageously to people, like being more overt about the fact that I am a coach and I need clients and please sign up and work with me. It's different from listening to the podcast. I think I spent the past 6 years doing this as a newbie, whereas like, no, I'm actually good at this shit. Like my clients all have jobs, they're happy, none of them are complaining, quite the other way around. Word of mouth is great and it's time, so I need to start sort of elevating the way that I show up, because I show up a lot, Natalie, that, like I'm always on. If anything, I'm doing less of that this year, but I'm showing up a bit more strongly, I think. I hope it doesn't rub people off the wrong way. It doesn't seem like it did, because I wrote a big manifesto, like a Jerry Maguire thing a couple of weeks ago on LinkedIn, and it went all right. So yeah, so that's it. Are you doing anything differently in the way that you're working?
Definitely, like when it comes to social media, and as a business owner, you'll know that you've got to find your channel on where you are, and have dabbled in them all over the last 6 years, but being very intentional around LinkedIn and intentional on Substack as well. And
Okay.
I really feel I've got a message and a story and a thought-provoking way to help people, really nurture that possibility mindset. So I'm being very intentional on those 2 platforms and writing more. So doing a little bit more writing. And, I've had a podcast, but I really do miss the podcasting. And so for me, again, not rushing or trying to force it, but feel like there's something that might come with that eventually as well. Definitely very intentional. I've definitely come into 2026 very intentional, and a little bit like you, over the years, I felt like a newbie. And on reflection towards the end of last year, I just remember thinking, no, I'm good at this. And I'll go and facilitate a workshop or a program, or I'll coach. I'll be like, no, I know what I'm doing and I know I can help people. And so I'm really nurturing that mindset of just, go out there and unapologetically but intentionally.
With the workshops that you have run in organizations around Australia, it has given you such great insight, as that external perspective looking in. What have you observed about workplace culture that if you could change it, like wave a wand and change it, that you would?
Yes, I feel like I've been waving a wand for the past 10 years around wellbeing, and it's still not changing. I do
Yeah.
think wellbeing is still seen as very much a nice to have and a tick the box exercise. And, I started my own business. My daughter was only 1. And I remember I set my intention back then that by the time she's working full time, wellbeing will not be a nice to have. It'll just be part of the culture, and she'll be seen for who she is and where she is, and she'll be supported to be her healthiest best. And she's 11 now. And so we're still not there. we are doing things, but we're not doing things that really change in the culture. It's very surface level. And so I love facilitating a workshop, but unless I'm in there actually creating real cultural change, it's not going to have the impact that we want it to have. And people are not going to take the learning or the behavior change that, I share and put it into action. They can't because, yeah. And if I think about the menopause piece, and I often said that, we've never had the vocabulary around the word menopause, and we need to build the literacy around the what and the why and the support that we need. And not just from for women, but for men, and really understanding we all go through life phases and changes. And we need to do the same with well-being. We need to build that literacy and really not see it as a buzzword, but see it as something that is deep in the core of who we are and how we show up and how we work.
Yeah. Talking about that, and you mentioned your daughter as well, and I'm thinking here, is it time for us to redesign the workday of especially the type of clients we see, knowledge workers? What would you do if you could with the way that we work, the 9 to 5 kind of expectations that people have? It just seems so wrong now, especially for people that are working hybrid or remote.
Yeah, it feels so archaic, doesn't it? And even, coming off school holidays and speaking to so many friends, it's the same thing. It's like, how is the work year so misaligned to the school year? And how are we expected to work? My daughter was sick day one of this year, and had to go into the city and do a face to face, but she was sick, and so I actually couldn't go in, so I had to change it to all online, which was fine. But yeah, it's really frustrating. And again, I think education really has to play a big piece. I don't think we're really curious or open-minded to what changing how the hours of the day, what that could actually do for productivity and what it could do for performance, and how long people might stay in the workplace for as well. I speak to some leaders who are worried about doing certain things, different initiatives, because they don't want their people to leave. And I always say, if people are eventually going to leave at some point, right? And if they can look back and say, I had an amazing experience at this organization, they then become an advocate for that organization for future employees. Why not? Let's give them the best experience whilst they're there. So I digress a little bit, but I think, we need to really have education. We really need to have a curious mind. And we also need to just be people and be humans and understand each of the circumstances that everyone's got, and how can we be adaptive to that. I look at some of the big organizations. I saw, can't remember his role, but someone from Medibank who's been a catalyst around the 4-day working week that they've got there. And, he spoke so highly around the increase in productivity and the morale. So we're seeing organizations doing it here in Australia, and they're having really great outcome in making, certain changes.
When you're working one-on-one with clients, sometimes there are two organizations, same industry, same country, completely different cultures. It's so fascinating to see. I sometimes have clients in the same organization, but with different managers and completely different work experiences.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I have been observing is this idea that some organizations have built their training or professional development program in a way that accidentally or not on purpose enhances the burnout potential, because of the way that the training is designed with all the best intentions. It's either a matter of too much training, or the facilitators that come are too eager to present, and just makes everybody a bit sort of anxious about what they need to do in order to be great, high performing members of the team. And they come to me for coaching later feeling quite deflated by the fact that they couldn't keep up with the expectations of the training that they have received. Have you observed that as well, or is that too niche?
No, I think it is a problem because, again, I think we're very much of a mindset around more, more, more.
Yeah.
And as a trainer and assessor, and I've worked at a few universities as well as doing workshops in workplaces, but there's a particular structure that you want to take. So when you are teaching, so you want to have a bit of content, but then you want to open up for some interactive engagement or interactive activities. It doesn't have to be a full block of teaching, you know what I mean? Or expectation that we need to just keep giving people more and more information. You know, there's little nuggets that we can give people that they can then take and action. And I think that's the really big piece, and probably one of my frustrations when it comes to health and well-being in the workplace, that it's just always about information and knowledge. Yes, we need that, but we need to create the space for people to action it on their terms as they can. We're not cookie cutters. We're not clones of each other. And different things make us tick. Our brains work differently. Everything operates differently, right? And so we need to create that space for people to actually enact and put some of that into action.
Do you think there's a high performing habit that has been sort of popularized in culture, in corporate culture, that is damaging?
100%. Yeah. More.
Give me an example. Which one would you retire if you could?
Just this notion of, we have constant meetings, don't we? And from each meeting, there comes a series of different actions that we're then expected to do. But by the time you have back to back meetings, your work day's ended. And so when do you do those actions? So I think, we've really got to create white space. I talk
I
about
love
white
that.
space in our life, but in our workday, we need to create white space. So we need to have times of reflection, times of just on our own doing our work, but also have those times of real high intensity action too. So I think I run marathons, and I take a lot of my learning from all the marathons that I've run, that, I set a future goal, but I come back to the very beginning and I train my body. But in training my body, I'm not just training it physically, I'm training it mentally as well. So I do a lot of yoga and mindset work to train it mentally. But then I'm also focused on my sleep, and I'm focused on my nutrition, and I'm focused on the rest, right? More so than anything, that white space. So, we need to almost adopt that mentality of training like an athlete.
I love that. Love that. You're so right. And I think one of the hardest things I have to do with new clients, I had one this morning, and she emailed me after the session asking for a couple of things, and I will have to go back and explain to her, is this idea of moving into action too quickly. And that's something that we are educated to do that, to achieve quickly as we start a new job, as we start job hunting and so forth. Whereas I'm a big believer in pre-work. So before going to market, it's not procrastination, it's just preparation, really. And I mean, if you're hiring a coach, you might as well benefit from the knowledge that in my case I have about how to best look for work, and sort of setting her expectations so that she knows that we will eventually get there, but right now is not the right time. We still need to do a little bit more of the preparation, self-analysis, and I need to understand her a little bit better before we go into. I mean, if I was a new coach or an insecure coach, I would want to please her and say, oh yeah, let's, that's what she wants, she needs it now, let's do it. But I'm at a stage now where I know that we will do a much better job for her if we take a step back before we go out to market
Yeah.
very quickly.
Yeah.
So that's,
Yeah. Could I
yeah.
share a personal story? So back in
Yeah.
2016, and this was me in my career in manufacturing, in sales. And it was about this time that year. So yeah, 10 years ago. And I said to myself, by the end of that year, I think I was going to be 34 at the end of that year. I said, I'm going to be in a new career. Now, I didn't know what it looked like or what it meant, but I just knew that that was going to be my focus for the year. And I gave myself that full year. And originally I came up with a side hustle, or just a small business that I came up with. And I didn't quit my job straight away. I was in that career still, but having that little side hustle is what helped me have that sense of purpose while doing the career and the work I needed to do to have an income, etc. But I gave myself that full year to just explore and be curious and try things, experiment with things. And eventually, I got there, but and it actually didn't even happen at the end of that year. It happened 2 years later, but I was fine with it. But I'd set that intention that this is my focus for the year. I'm not going to turn everything upside down. I'm just going to be, connect back to myself. I was very stressed, values, my why, all those sorts of things.
Awesome. I love that. That's such a coincidence because 10 years ago was also when I started coaching as a side hustle. Yeah, yeah. So that's interesting. Okay, what do you think for knowledge workers is more important this year? Confidence, courage, or clarity? I know you want to say all of them, but choose one.
Oh, there's definitely one that resonates most, and that's courage. And I think mainly because in a world of AI, and I know there's a lot of people who don't like AI, we have to find ways to harness AI and be courageous in showing up using AI. So particularly as a business owner, if we're out there marketing ourselves, but even people looking for work too, yeah, we can use AI to support what we need to do behind the scenes, but AI doesn't replace the person, doesn't replace the human, the personality, the emotions that we feel. And so it is going to take courage to show up with all of that in a very AI driven world. So I'm going to say courage.
I always say courage. I'm such a
Yeah.
big fan of courage. I talk about courage all the bloody time because job hunting is really, it makes you super insecure and lacking in confidence. When people come to me and they say, I need you to help me with my confidence. And I'm like, I'm not sure that I can do that, but I can help you be courageous. Right. So courage is something that I can help you with. And then over time, you will become more confident about job search and career development. But clarity, dear, I've given up.
It builds over time, right? Doesn't it? Like it's
Yeah.
being courageous to
Yeah.
take that first step. That builds confidence. That's confidence in action. And then clarity starts to form. But then you know what? Then you have a pivot and then you have another change and then you got to be courageous again. It's like this cycle.
Exactly. And AI is everywhere and it's in job search, on both ends, for the job seeker using it and also the recruiter and how they go through hundreds of applications. It's machine learning, bots, AI and all of that. It's also taking more and more of the work away from us. I don't know. Has it taken some of the work away from you? Are you using AI?
Yeah,
And what do you do with the time that you have now that AI is doing some tasks for you?
Yeah, so I think AI's definitely helped with a bit of efficiency, but also more so just getting very clear on messaging as well and helping me to solidify my thought leadership, the conversations that I want to have. But also I don't feel like it's freed up too much time in the sense of I'm still very conscious about being a human and still showing up as who I am. So it's helped with efficiencies. But yeah, for me as a person, I keep coming back to, I've got to keep showing up as me.
Yeah, I think I was reading yesterday I think it's called a scan report, something that advertising agencies do to kind of give people a clue on what to focus in the year ahead. And they were talking about going back to analog. They were talking about going back to love, like this is an agency, not just something that people are interested in Korea. But I think some of the things that have happened for the past couple of months, in terms of pop culture and what's, trending right now made them think, okay, no, that we've had enough of AI
Mm.
or internet or hybrid or remote. We want to see people face to face. We want to have real connections. And I thought, oh, this is interesting because I have been thinking about having meetings. I usually do clients virtually, but I'm even with the podcast listeners, I have been thinking about running some events where people can just get together and meet
Yeah.
me and have conversations. Since I'm going to be overseas as well, I can do it in different parts of the world, which will be nice. I don't know when this episode's going out, everybody, but look in the episode show notes if I am running events. You can come and attend them because I think that that human connection is coming up as something really important. Last question for you, Natalie. If we have to focus on one or two capabilities to, work on for 2026 and beyond, what would it be? What do you think from working with your clients and with workplaces that humans need to work more as a muscle to grow and be more capable in doing?
I'm going to say, and they probably, always inverted commas, the soft capabilities. But again, there's a theme to what I'm passionate about. I think emotional intelligence is one of the greatest superpowers that we're just not nurturing. And That then becomes, self-awareness. So understanding self-awareness, that motivation, empathy as well. And if I think about what you shared there from that agency around love, and not love, doesn't even have to be in a romance context, but just showing love and spreading love and having kindness, emotional intelligence is something that really helps support, build deep relationships. And again, I just don't think we can get away from that. And I don't want to. And I don't think we should be excited to, be behind a robot. So I think emotional intelligence. And then of course, again, I think another great one is mindfulness. And it comes back to creating those white spaces, opportunity to be present, to focus on, where we are, who we're becoming. I saw a great post on LinkedIn about, at 18, we're expected to work out what our career is for the next 40 years with the notion that we won't ever change or evolve. And then when we do, everyone's like, oh, you're doing something different, or what's wrong with you? But you do this and now you're doing this, So again, we've got to be very mindful of our growth and our evolution, and not just in our biology, but the evolution in our mind and our fulfillment and what it is that we want. So I think, emotional intelligence and mindfulness are some real human capabilities that we can keep nurturing.
Love that. Natalie, it has been wonderful to talk to you again. I had such a great time the first time we had a conversation together with Lisa, and I'll put the link below to that one. But it's nice to have a chat with a fellow coach and have a conversation about topics that are dear to me and dear to you. You're wonderful. I will put a link below for people that want to reach out to you and work with you and hire you. And I hope that you come back in a year or two to have another conversation.
I would love that. Thank you so much, Renata. It's always a pleasure chatting with you. Thanks. Bye.